Wow. Oh, smells good already. So today we have one simple goal, and that is to get all of this mead, which we already put through the primary fermentation process, re-racked or racked, I guess, into carboys to begin the secondary fermentation stage. We've waited a little bit longer than we probably should have. I'm a little worried that the solids from the fruit being in here may kind of affect the flavor in the long run, because I think leaving the solids in too long can kind of create bitterness. But we're going to check the specific gravity, make sure that we've got a sufficient alcohol by volume, and then work on getting things set up to ferment probably for the next couple of months. This is a gallon of apricot. This is a gallon of blueberry. Ooh, wow, that is dark. Holy cow. Oh, smells so good. Ooh, a gallon of huckleberry. Ooh, that's looking rich. Wow. That has such a unique alcohol smell to it. It doesn't smell like the other two. Like this has like its own, I can't even tell you, like it's different. This one and that one, pretty crazy. And then finally, raspberry. Oh yeah, it's ready to be racked. We want to be careful that we don't swish or swirl these buckets too much, because a lot of the fruit will actually settle to the bottom of the bucket. And part of what we're doing with secondary fermentation is clearing up the beverage. Not only because it's more visually appealing, but a lot of this stuff can contain pectin. And that pectin, from what I understand, I'm not 100% sure on that, it can actually bitter the beverage. So when we rack and re-rack and stuff like that, part of that is removing all the solids that settle over time. You can see this fruit, these used to be bright red raspberries, and they're kind of looking like whitish or like albino. And that tells me that a lot of the color and the flavor and the sugars and everything are long gone, and it's ready to be removed. We sort of made this process harder on ourselves than necessary by not using a straining bag. We could have put the fruit inside of a nylon bag or something and set it in there. It would have done all the same job, except for removing it would have been a lot easier. Instead, it's going to be pretty difficult because it's kind of like straining jelly. It just takes a long time, and there's a lot of things that clog when you try to strain it out. So I think we're going to kind of go in the order from biggest fruit to smallest, in the hope that by the time we get down to the raspberries, the seeds and things won't be a pain in the butt to get them to strain through. We purchased a straining bag from our local brew shop. They actually have quite a variety of sizes, I guess I'll call them, not just the physical size, but the tightness of the weave. We chose one that has a pretty big weave. We realized that a lot of the sediment and things is gonna find its way through. We'll just deal with that when we re-rack later, basically moving from secondary to secondary. Right now, we want to basically get just all the bulk solids of the fruit out without having to spend all day trying to strain the bag. So if you're looking for a brew bag, look at a brew shop. If you look elsewhere, like at a canning shop or in a canning section of a department store, you're probably going to find something that's too fine and it's going to drive you nuts. I wonder if this will fit over our bucket. Oh yeah, totally. If we do this very slowly, see all that stuff in the bottom? Hopefully that will all just stay toward the bottom. So if we stop now, we're gonna lose all that mead right there, so we're unfortunately gonna have to keep going and deal with all that solids, which is why we have the straining bag. I don't think I want to squeeze this, because if I do, it's likely I'm going to push through some of the now deceased yeast. We're trying to get rid of a lot of that stuff instead of force it into the brew. But you can see how much liquid is in all this stuff, and if we let it go now, we're giving up all that mead. This is part of why you overbrew just a little bit. That way, through the racking process, you end up with a desirable amount of end product, because you're always going to lose a little bit. In a perfect world, we'd probably have 4 of these strainer bags. In fact, we may invest in those for the future, just so we can put the fruit inside of them when we brew. But if we were to walk away from this for a couple of hours and come back, all this water would run out all on its own, and you'd have a lot less pulp. But we've got to get it done now. See all that? That's all like dead yeast and stuff. You don't really, you don't want that in your brew. So that's kind of part of the process of re-racking, is to get rid of all that sediment. And if you can just avoid putting it in your brew to begin with, that's the best way to go. So I guess I could share this, what I'm learning through this process. If we would have put the fruit in a bag, you could just pull the fruit out like that, and then you could actually siphon off the primary and leave all that stuff in the bottom, and just like that, you've already saved yourself probably at least 1 re-rack, which takes time, so why not save yourself effort? Kind of realized I could probably just set one of these fruits in this strainer while I work on the other one and just let it kind of do its thing over time. Before we rack this into the carboys, we want to do an alcohol or a hydrometer test. When we first started this brew, we were at about 1.9. I don't even know what that means. Specific gravity is 1.9. There, that's the answer. I don't know what it means, but that's the specific gravity. What that tells us is the amount of sugar that's in the must. And what it tells us is how much alcohol will be produced if the yeast were to consume all of the sugar. We would end up with a particular alcohol by volume. We want to check this before we put it in the carboy to see if there's still a bunch of sugar in there, like the yeast either died or the yeast gave up. That'll kind of tell us where we're at with the must. Of course, when we're done, I think we want to be around a 1.0 on the specific gravity. And that would be for a dry mead, if you're kind of into that dry thing. But that's the point where we'd actually back sweeten, because we prefer more of a dessert wine type thing. So we would add sugar back, but we've got to make sure there's no yeast and there's no fermentation or no brewing going on. It's definitely a lot lower than 1.9. So it looks like we're probably around 1.13. So there's still some sugar in there. It's not completely gone. I think a dry mead is like 1.08 or 1.07 or something like that. Yeah, so there's still some brewing that's going to happen. I think once we rack it, we may find that we kind of stirred up some sugar that had either settled to the bottom that the yeast couldn't get to, or something. There's still sugar in this. So after we put it in the carboy and we put an airlock on it, we would expect to see some brewing happening. It's hard to believe that a liquid this cloudy will end up being absolutely perfectly clear by the time we're ready to bottle it. And this is why swishing that around really is not ideal, because all this sediment gets mixed up into your mead. This is already pretty strong alcohol. I think it's probably somewhere around 6 or 7% by volume. I can't remember what the exact numbers are. Oh, here we go. At 1.1, we're about, oh, actually it's not that strong. Oh, 1.1. Yeah, so this is probably somewhere around 10% alcohol by volume. I mean, that's stronger than a good beer. So that gives us an idea. We checked the potential sugar. If you haven't seen the video where we did the initial fermentation on this, we checked the specific gravity. And the reason we did that before we started the fermentation process is you want to make sure there's enough sugar in the brew for the yeast to do its job, and then to yield the amount of alcohol in your final product that you want. So this has already got a lot of alcohol in it. Once we get this racked and the yeast starts doing its job again, it could go even higher, maybe 12% or 13%. And then, of course, over time, this will become extremely clear, which we'll have to do in future videos because it takes a couple months. Oof, right on the nubbin. Uh-oh.
You could fit it in here.
Maybe. Don't waste your brew. Pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. There's probably not even a quarter of a cup in there. Casualties of war. Alyssa talked me into getting these little mason jar fermentation lids. This is actually a kit that's designed for fermenting things like sauerkraut and vegetables and stuff. But if you know what you're looking at, it looks just like an airlock for brewing. So she doesn't know, but we're gonna be making some brew with these things. And it's convenient because the problem is we're gonna lose volume. Every time we rack this stuff into a new carboy to add clarity, right, to get rid of the solids, we're gonna lose volume. So we're starting here with a gallon and a quart, and what we're hoping when we're all said and done is that we have a gallon. I think we're probably gonna come out with more than that, but since you only brew once, you really want to get everything you can. And these little lids make this extra quart super convenient. Otherwise, you end up having to use a full gallon jug or something similar, and then you have all this air gap in there. And you really don't want that air gap. That's oxygen in your brew, and I'm not really sure what would happen, but it's not a good idea. Perfect. And this is for dinner tonight. I guess if you were desperate, you could just brew this every single week. It's gonna taste not that great, but ironically, it's pretty dang good already. I mean, it's gonna get better, but that's what it tasted like the last time when we bottled it. Excuse me, when we racked it, you could taste, it's like your taste buds can taste the fruit, the water, and the alcohol. And over the course of 2 to 6 months, somehow all those flavors become one. But that tastes amazing, and it's only been 2 weeks. Wow, I'm having that for dinner tonight. Perfect. We found these Airlocks. They're very affordable. These are plastic. I believe you can get something similar in glass if you're just like a die-hard glass brewer person. But they come with a rubber stopper, and they're designed to fit kind of the run-of-the-mill carboys. But you can get many different sizes of stopper. So if you're wanting to brew on a budget, something we found out, this carboy, if you buy it from the brew shop, will cost you about $7. This bottle of apple juice, if you buy it at the store, will cost you about $7. And you get the carboy for free. So you might as well drink the apple juice, or if you really want to have fun, pitch some yeast in there and just mix yourself some apple cider. So if you want to save money, do it this way, but you may have to find a stopper that fits these bottles because not all of these are the same size. We have found some of the organic apple juices have this monster throat on the bottle, and of course these stoppers, they don't fit. So invest in a variety of stoppers. We're trying to find a way to standardize this process so that we don't have 50 of this and 6 of those and 2 of these. So we may end up kind of giving up on some of these random bottles over time. But if you're just getting started, this is a really efficient way to build your glass collection. Oops. There we go. Wow, you can see already the amount of sediment that's worked its way to the bottom. And I mean, look at how much that is. So when we re-rack, it's not inconceivable to lose as much as a cup, a full cup out of this jar. And the little jar means we'll probably lose 1/8 of a cup. So, I mean, there's a lot of loss in this re-racking process. I think when we get all done, we'll have 1 rack of a gallon and maybe a little left over. So if there's any yeast left in here, which we assume there is because there's still sugar, we would expect to see bubbles probably within 24 hours or so coming out of the airlock. We'll have to wait and see if there's latent yeast. If there's not, we may have to add just a little bit of yeast to kind of kick the brew back in to get all that alcohol that we want. In the airlocks, we're using distilled water. It's not critical, but it's a good idea. It seems like everything around brewing is really about saving the brew because these things take so long to produce a product. If you lose a brew because of some rogue yeast or something else, it's just a tragedy. So distilled water is safe. The other thing that a lot of brewers use is vodka. It's pretty safe because nothing can grow in vodka. Well, now we just have to repeat those same steps 3 more times, rinse and repeat. Well, what do we have here? Look at that. That's what a pound or a quart of blueberries looks like after it gets done turning into mead. Ooh, that's pretty low. Those berries dissolved down to nothing. Look at that. Probably all on the bottom. Oh yeah, look at all that in the bottom. I kind of want to see if this will go through the strainer. Holy cow. Even if this one doesn't taste the best, it'll be the most satisfying because it represents the most work. It's good now, but I know it'll taste better later and it'll be more clear. So I'm wondering if that'll give it more of a, I'll say it's not dry. It's not dry right now. So maybe like stopping the brew right now would be really great, or back sweetening, but I'll say it's definitely good. This one's huckleberry. I haven't tried the blueberry. I should try that too. Blueberry. It's definitely different, but also good. This is gonna be really fascinating. I already know what the huckleberry tastes like because we made that last time and I've never made blueberry. This is interesting. Well, that does it for the mead for today. It feels really good. Finding the time to do that right and enjoy it, that's a little hard to come by lately. But getting everything set up to continue fermenting feels good. Having a place to do this, I think, probably feels even better. If you haven't been following us, we've been working on our house for coming up on a couple of years now. And it's taken us that long to have a place to even do this type of stuff. We didn't have enough water, a clean place to work, a place to store this stuff, kind of in a temperature controlled environment. And it's something that we're still kind of teaching ourselves. We've been working on our canning skills. We did a garden last year. We preserved a lot of the fruit in forms of jam and juices and stuff. And this is just one more way that we're teaching ourselves to preserve the fruit that we're ironically finding for free, A, in the community around us, and B, by just foraging on public lands. We'll keep an eye on this every single day. I think that's kind of a side benefit of brewing your own stuff, is just the pleasure of looking at it. It's kind of the same benefit or side benefit of having a garden. Just nurturing something, it feels good to work in a green, kind of growing, life-giving thing. And we'll keep an eye on this every day. I mean, it's amazing in just the time it took us to re-rack this, how much these have settled out. So that'll be the next step. We'll keep an eye on the airlocks to see if we get any bubbling action, which would be latent yeast. Of course, when we stirred all that up, that's very likely. In fact, we know from looking at the specific gravity, there's still just a tiny bit of sugar in each one of these things. And they're not super dry from taste testing them. They just have just a hint of sweetness. So over time, we'll keep an eye on them. We'll let things kind of settle out. When they're getting pretty clear, we'll probably stop. We'll take these and re-rack them, put them from this carboy into a new carboy, and we'll kind of start the airlock and all that over again. Add a couple of months and hopefully we'll be ready for bottling. The same thing is kind of true for the canning that we've been doing. We've been trying to find a system. It's become obvious over the last couple of years there's certain things we just don't eat. Some of that stuff we just give away because the fruit is accessible to us and we had the time, so we preserved it, but it's not really something that's in our diet and we just can't find a way to enjoy it. With alcohol, we don't consume much of it, but having it around sure is nice, maybe on an evening or when you have guests over, and it's certainly a nice gift to give. We're hoping now that we've got the space, we've kind of got a system, this was a lot easier than the first time we did it, that we can kind of get a system going and have brews kind of constantly in progress. Because it takes so long to get this stuff where it's kind of primo, it'll probably be heavy for us for a while on the brew side, and then on the bottle side, and then hopefully at some point we'll kind of get to where we can just maintain the pantry with stuff that we really like. I'm really curious to see how these each turn out. I haven't found one that I don't like yet, but I'm wondering which one will be my favorite, and I think that's the one that's probably going to go the fastest. So we'll have to look for more of that fruit next season. We have a few neighbors in our area who greatly appreciate homemade things in general, and alcohol is one of those. So I'm hoping to take a couple of these leftover little bits. Even though they haven't really settled out, they're a little cloudy, they will appreciate having some of those. In fact, this little tiny bit of raspberry right here came out of a neighbor's garden, and it's not much, but I think even he will appreciate a little swig of freshly made mead from the raspberries in his garden.